Well, Emmanuel Kant was argued, towards the end of Wesley's century, that the key idea of the Enlightenment was that people were to think for themselves. Dare to think for yourself was Kant's famous statement in his little article entitled "What is Enlightenment?" And Wesley was a part of that generation of people, and that how important it was to think for yourself and to not be captured by opinions of others that may not be your opinions. And so Wesley preached wrote the sermon on the Catholic spirit because he believed the Methodist people should be people who on the one hand were strong in their own faith and their own convictions, but who were prepared to listen and try to understand the views of others.
This actually came about historically, I think, over the period of Wesley's life, where Methodism was treated with great suspicion initially,
yes.
But by the end of his life he was recognised as perhaps almost as famous as the King of England, and had an ability to really go anywhere with a lot of grace and favour.
Well, Samuel Johnson, one of the great writers of that period, said that Wesley was probably the most influential man in England in his time. His only problem was, according to Johnson, was that he never had time to stop and talk.
Oh, he was always his way to
busy doing something.
Right.
And that's another characteristic, and that's one thing that Methodists have to be careful about, is that we can get awfully busy doing the work of the church, and forget to think. You know what I mean? And so, but the Catholic spirit is about recognizing the fact that one of the enduring qualities of being human is that we make mistakes. We make errors, whether we like it or not. And we make errors of judgment. We make mistakes in terms of on conclusions we draw about others and so on. We could be wrong. And Wesley didn't want to rule out that possibility.
Catholic spirit allows for the possibility that others may be correct,
Exactly.
because you're not not dismissing them.
And this is David. This is an incredibly powerful idea in its time, because remember, in that time, the dominant religious forces were defined by creeds and confessions. There was the Westminster Confession in Scotland. There were the Articles of Religion of the Church of England, which Wesley quite casually reduced from 39 to 25. There was the Augsburger Confession in Germany. There were all of these confessional documents, and this emphasis on being a Reformed church. We're seeing it resurgent today in our own churches today, with the decisions of the recent Presbyterian Assembly and so on. But everything was defined by confession, and confession meant you believed in a certain way. And Wesley was not comfortable with that.
So Methodism really had at its heart a kind of broad outlook that's been enduring.
Yes.
It's sometimes said, at least in the context of New Zealand Methodism, that we've been a liberal church for a long time.
Yeah.
But maybe the seeds of liberality rather than liberalism, the ability to allow others to hold differing opinions and yet to walk the Christian walk with them, has been at the heart of Methodist doctrine.
I think so, but I think also that I think Methodism, I prefer the word radical, in that Wesley was trying to see all the sides of something. Because he was so busy, he didn't really have time to do the kind of thorough research and so on that some others before him had done. But when you look at his reading, I mean, he read not just the Anglican sources, he read not just the Reformed sources. He was familiar with Eastern Christianity when that was orthodoxy was hardly even a concept for most people in that part of the world. I mean, he roamed all over the place because he was interested in so many different things. I mean, he was also interested in healthcare, and his primitive physics is a classic example of that. He even engaged in
electrotherapy.
Therapy, yeah. But he was interested in, that's the Enlightenment part of him. And he wanted to defend a person's right to think for themselves. But at the same time, he wanted to encourage Methodists to be strong in their own faith, and to be clear in their own views. In a sense, in that way he was an evangelical, I would say, in the best sense of the word, the way Luther would have used the term evangelical, you know.
Well, one of the things why I think Catholic spirit had to arise in Wesley's sermons was that he rigorously applied the same concepts, for example, to his work on electrotherapy. At one stage he was defending the work of Benjamin Franklin and suggesting that the Royal Society of all bodies had it wrong to exclude Franklin's ideas about electricity.
Right.
And surprisingly enough, when Franklin became aware of Wesley's work in electrotherapy, he didn't defend Wesley in the same way that Wesley had defended Franklin's science. But there is something very curious going on in that period, and it's as if Wesley reaches almost an apex of what it is to be both moved by the heart and moved by the mind at the same time.
Well, and he didn't want to divorce the mind from the heart. But there's an inherent inclusivity in Methodism, and you know we ignore it at our own peril, because I think that Wesley was interested in so many things, and the very fact that he took the time to go to the very people that nobody else wanted to associate with speaks volumes for him.
In fact, Methodism couldn't have succeeded if he had taken the same message to the clergy class.
No, they wouldn't have.
Right.
Yeah.
Jim, I wonder if you'd like to just draw out for us a little bit on a concept that some will be aware of. It's called the Wesley and Quadrilateral, and I think it's very much a part of the Age of Reason or the Age of Enlightenment. Would you have some comments on the Quadrilateral?
Well, the Quadrilateral is, what is it? Reason, faith, experience, and Scripture. Yeah, those four. Luther, in the Reformation, restored Scripture to the central role of the Church. We need to go to the Scriptures.
This is the what's the Latin phrase? Sola
Scriptura. And we need to go to the Scriptures. But Wesley felt that even if we went to the Scriptures, there are other dimensions of God's love and God's experience of God in our lives that we need to be cognizant of. And one of them is experience.
Now, by experience, do we mean what we experience with the heart?
Yeah, I think to a point. For instance, you take Wesley's view of the Trinity. When he was asked to explain the Trinity, he didn't enter into a profound theological explication of the Trinity. What he did was he said the Trinity is a doctrine of the heart. He said a man will know God's love through the presence of Jesus Christ, witnessed to him in the experience of his heart. That's the way he understood the Trinity. But you see, it's based on experience. You talk about it because you talk about it out of your own personal experience. And reason, he believed, once one, as it were, is being filled with God's grace, or is being guided by God's grace, reason then can begin to see things in new ways.
So reason itself opens up. It's
Opens
not,
up new, yeah,
yeah.
it enlarges reason. It doesn't restrict reason as so much of the confessional documents try to do. You know, there's only this way and that's it. Because reason wants to look around. And what Wesley was trying to do was to show how important it is to, to take all of these dimensions of the human experience of God as foundations for the Christian faith, rather than just to say it's Scripture alone, as Luther did. But historically, I think Wesley understood that Luther had to say that. That in itself was a necessary thing to do.
But in the same way, the other point of the quadrilateral that you mentioned as being the faith, that's the traditions of the church.
Yeah, that's right.
And Wesley was, as you've mentioned previously, not just acquainted with the Protestant tradition or the Roman Catholic tradition, but also had the way of the Orthodox.
He read a lot of the Eastern writers. Macarius is one classic example of Wesley's work. He was quite familiar with many of the writings of Eastern.
He translates Macarius, doesn't
Yes,
he?
he did.
In part of the volumes
Right.
called the Works.
Mm-hmm. And his master's, which most people don't know about, was in moral philosophy. Was based on Corinthians, but he was quite familiar with many of the classical, ancient Greek philosophers, Plato, Aristotle, and so on.
Well, now, I didn't know that. And just talking of writing a thesis, you have a marvellous story that I've called The Miracle of the Broom Closet.
Yes.
Would you like to explain the miracle, the Wesleyan Broom Closet
Wesleyan
miracle?
Broom Closet was found at Richmond College out on the Thames, outside of London, where I spent some time as a visiting fellow at the invitation of Raymond George, who at the time was the principal of the college. I had been at Oxford at Lincoln doing research on Wesley, and he invited me to come over to Richmond for a while. So I did that, and I happened to be wandering down one of the corridors of Richmond College. It's no longer in existence. The Methodist Church in England now, I understand, has closed it. I was wandering down one of the corridors trying to find my way around the place and so on, and I'd been looking at some Wesley sources, and I happened to go into this room thinking it might be a loo, because I needed to take a break, and it was a janitor's closet. But up in the wall there were these shelves filled with books. And I looked at these books and I said, those books look interesting. So I reached up and pulled one down, and sure enough, it was a book by Nicole Malebranche, a French philosopher that Wesley had been reading. And I opened it up and I started looking, and I noticed there were these remarks written in the margins, and I knew right away, having seen it before, this is Wesley's handwriting. And sure enough, there was part of his private library sitting in the broom closet at Richmond College. And they were astounded. They were ashamed in a way, because they had no idea those books were sitting there. And of course, they immediately took them down and transferred them over to City Road for, cataloging.
Did they go into the bookcase and...
Probably. I don't know what happened. After, they were given back to City Road, and I don't know what John Boehmer was the director of the archives there.
Right.
Yeah.